Hi, and welcome back. It's taken us 5 Sundays now to go through Ruth chapter 1. We've been going at it in a sort of leisurely pace. What I want to do here today is just to give you a survey, a retrospective survey, a review of Ruth chapter 1. Now, if you have been tuning into both the sermons on Ruth and these 1225 live episodes, I want to thank you for that. The concern that I have in doing both sermons and these episodes is that we would really own the book of Ruth, really listen to what God is saying to us in this book. Now, the very first verse of the story, Ruth 1:1, that verse gives us lots of important information. Historically speaking, we learn that the story is set in that rather chaotic time of the Judges. Agriculturally, we learn that there is a famine in the land, and we might also say theologically we learn that there's a famine in the land. Probably that particular famine had been sent by God as a result of the people's obstinate wickedness. Nationally speaking, we're dealing with a family who hails from Judah, and this family, of course, makes the move. They make the decision to travel into Moab in order to find food there. And they make that move without any explicit word from the Lord to do so. And then while they're in Moab, the 2 sons of the family take Moabite wives. And so now the total number of people is up to 6. 3 of those people die in fairly short order. First Elimelech, and then both his sons, Machlon and Chilion. So then we have 3 women. We have Naomi, Ruth, and Orpah. Naomi sets out to shuv, to return to her native Judah, to the promised land, because she had heard that Yahweh had given Lachem, back in Beit Lachem, in Bethlehem, he had given food. So she sets out to return. And her 2 Moabite daughters, Ruth and Orpah, or daughters-in-law, I should say, they also are said in the narrative to be returning to Judah, which is interesting because, of course, they've never been to Judah, as far as we know. But the deal there is that they are daughters of Lot. They are descendants of Lot. Lot, of course, had left the promised land, or had turned away from the promised land back in the days when he was with Abraham. Now these 2 daughters-in-law of Lot are returning into the promised land in that broader sense. Along the road, Naomi mounts a case against Ruth and Orpah, continuing with her into Judah. And in that moment, Naomi invokes the name of Yahweh and prays his chesed, his kindness, to be apparent in the lives of both Ruth and Orpah. And of course, that theme of chesed will become a very prominent theme in the story of Ruth. So now, they're on the road, the question is, which way will Ruth and Orpah turn? Of course, Orpah decides to follow the common sense, practical advice of Naomi. She turns back and starts heading back to Moab. Ruth, for her part, cleaves or clings to her mother-in-law Naomi. And then we have Ruth's great speech, her speech of love and commitment and great faith. She's going to stay with Naomi and go into Judah. So Naomi and Ruth then continue together into Judah, into Bethlehem, in fact, where the women of the town, when they see Naomi and Ruth coming, they can't believe their eyes as they look at a rather haggard-looking Naomi, very much looking different than she did at least 10 years earlier when they had seen her last. And Naomi, in that moment, of course, requests a name change. She says, "Don't call me Naomi, pleasant, any longer. Call me Mara, bitter." And as Naomi and the women of the town of Bethlehem talk together, Ruth is effectively ignored by everybody. She receives no official welcome into the town of Bethlehem, and Naomi is too self-absorbed in that moment to even introduce Ruth to the townspeople. And then we have the last words of chapter 1, which are words of hope. They are words that are forward-looking as we learn in that last verse of the chapter that Ruth and Naomi had come into Bethlehem in April or May at the beginning of barley harvest. As Bruce Waltke has said in the book of Ruth, the agricultural is always just a step ahead of the personal. The agricultural is always just a step ahead of the personal. And what he means by that is that in this particular instance, this agricultural harvest, this notice we have of the barley harvest, is just a step ahead of a greater spiritual harvest, personal harvest, that's going to happen in the lives of both Naomi and Ruth. In terms of the chapter's connection to the New Testament, of course, our focus turns toward Jesus, the bread of life, the one who comes to end our famine, our spiritual famine, and satiate our hunger. Jesus comes from the house of his Father into a distant land. He is born onto this earth where Jesus is despised and rejected, kind of like Ruth coming into Bethlehem and being ignored there. Jesus is despised and rejected, and yet he stands beside bitter, complaining Naomi's, like you and I, in order to bring the greatest blessing of redemption that God has ever poured out. And then in God's greatest act of chesed, or loving kindness, Jesus goes to the cross, there to die for sinners. And Jesus calls those prodigals that he has rescued, that he has saved, he calls us to acts of chesed, gestures of kindness toward our neighbor. So there is a brief recap of Ruth chapter 1. I can't wait to venture into Ruth chapter 2 with you. Stay tuned and be blessed.